thing about state, again, like with this game, it's like a server, say you want like a process to, as a player to join, you might say the state is you're waiting for a player and then your screen's going.
You could do that, yeah.
How do you change the state, like in this example? Like, do you just say state equals
So you change the state by returning a new state in the tuple, in handle call and handle cast.
Where would it be, like in, because that what you're returning there just goes back to whoever called.
No. So reply on the left is telling the actual gen server work that you have to send a reply back. The reply that gets sent back is the atom OK. The third element of the tuple is this new list, which is going to become the new state. Yeah. And we have 10 minutes. How are we doing?
Not great.
Not great. What's happening?
I'm trying to figure out the syntax for this update.
You're trying to do map update or something like that? Of course you are. I'm going to look this up before I come over. Like if anybody in this room is going to do things that I don't know, it's going to be you.
I have the map update stuff. It's working for mine, so.
Oh, right, because map.update has like the properties with the function and things like that, right? Yeah.
Right, and I basically want to sign onto the list, and I think I have the syntax right, but it keeps on giving me back just a single element list.
Do you want to see what he has first and see if that solves your problem? I mean, I can come over, but
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
put it in the put it in the chat.
I guess the server is now going to shut off.
The server's going to shut off? What's happening here? What are we doing?
Well, I was trying to think, so I started the link here, and then I called this just Elixir with the name of the file, the XS file.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to run it, and it's going to get to the bottom of this file, and since this was a genserver.call, it's going to just like synchronously, I'm going to get the output that I want.
Mm-hmm.
But the server, I guess, is going to die with the dying of this, executing of this script because of
Oh yeah, that might happen.
So this is implied that it's player 1 and player 2, and calling, adding game to this generic server, or you're adding to the generic server of that PID.
Yep.
It's adding 3 games, and okay, cool. And then stats gives you
Is
okay,
it accurate that
player 1 wins.
player 1 wins when does Lizard beat Stock? Is that how that works?
That's the least interesting part of your program.
I mean, I'm going to take that as a win. It's like, well, this worked. Was this right?
Yeah.
So maybe that'll work.
Does that make any sense?
Maybe.
Let me see. Your state might be different. So
Yeah, no, I get that. Update bang has different values.
Oh yeah. So the update you have to give it initial values. So that's like there's no key there to begin with.
Right.
But update bang. Since I set my state up with zeros in there.
Yeah.
I don't need that. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I set my initial state with an empty list, and I'm still getting weirdness.
So when you said the amount of time stat, is that like the number of times they chose, say, rock, of
Yeah.
the times they played?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, in practice, all I really want you guys to do is have a process that holds state and changes the state and returns the changes, so you can see that it's working and it's not completely magic, right? And since you have the link to the slides, you can then do all of this work over again later, have documentation, code. Hopefully things that will work for you once you've gone through this workshop and you don't need me anymore.
Would you say Elixir is...
The best thing ever, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Elixir is to Erlang what Ruby is to...
No.
Okay. Like...
Elixir is to Erlang as Scala is to Java,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
There's
There's
no...
no equivalent in Ruby. So.
No, because, I mean, Ruby is built in C and it's not built on top of anything.
Yeah, yeah.
You could say,
But it's just like a more pleasant way to work. Like you want to do Erlang type stuff. You can. It's just like a more pleasant language to use, or there's some reason why you. Is there something Elixir offers that you can do?
well, UTF-8 strings is a big one.
But you can call out those methods from Erlang, right?
You need access, yeah, you need access to it, but you
I'm
can.
saying Erlang doesn't handle.
Correct, it has a really hard time with UTF-8.
They added it in one of the latest versions.
Hmm?
They added the Spring support in
Oh.
the latest version, but it was like 10 years. Everybody was like, why do you do that?
Right.
It's super gross.
Yeah, it's unpleasant. It's unpleasant.
There's also a pretty interesting blog post from Joe Armstrong, the creator of Erlang,
Yes.
where he talks about how much nicer Elixir is. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty high.
You would hope that
You did?
after whatever years that someone creates something new, it's going to be a lot better than
Yeah.
existing. It's constrained by what its history was.
All right, we have 5 minutes until the snacks, which means I'm going to lock the door so you guys can't leave early. So seriously, one reason to use Elixir is because it has a syntax that is a lot closer to what we expect modern programming syntax to look like.
Okay.
Erlang syntax works, I've learned to read it, but there are things that you have to do in Erlang that you just don't need to do here because the abstractions are better. And you could build the abstractions in Erlang, but then no one who reads Erlang would read your code because that's not the convention.
Speaking of the abstractions, have you done, and Bean does hot code reload, have you done any of the actual production hot code reload with Elixir? Had any luck with that?
If you define production as I have updated the code of my side project without taking it down, then yes.
Okay.
And if you define production as something that has users other than me, then no.
But it works.
It absolutely works.
It didn't interrupt your work.
My side project is this Dwarf Fortress /Mud clone in Elixir.
Oh, nice.
It's madness. It's complete madness. I love it.
You go to mud. That's ambitious.
I will put the code. I would put the link to the code in the chat. And so the connection that I have is via Telnet, and at the very least, I can update the code when I'm logged in via Telnet, and I'm still logged in via Telnet, right? And the mobs that are moving around are still moving around. Granted, it has a problem right now, and I'm not sure what it is exactly. It dies horribly after a while. I think it runs out of memory. I think the box runs out of memory, and so it triggers the Linux OOM killer, but I'm not sure. So it's a long, long discovery process of all the bad ways to write code in Elixir. Yeah. Still confused, okay. That's
The question is actually in the showering.
I'll take a look at it. It'll be easier than squatting next to you. You are JSpotter?
Yeah.
Well, the problem that you have is that you're not assigning the return value of update to anything.
Oh, it doesn't just.
It's immutable. It's completely immutable. So you're absolutely making the right change twice, just to the same data structure, not to the new one.
And
There we go.
Got it.
All right, it is officially time for snacks and a half an hour break. You have all earned it. When we last left our heroes, state, code, optional small break, RPS as a service. I'm not sure that's online, by the way, so if you have a startup idea, I'm just saying. You guys have seen is it a nano service, the femto service, the service that just upcases things? There's a website that just upcases things. It's a microservice. No, it's smaller than that. Did you guys look at this yet? I forget. Was this part of what you guys did or not? Okay. Let me take a quick gander at what's right after, because we have like an hour and a half left.
Is there a persistence? Like, so you're creating this state and it's living in memory, but if your server dies, your users are.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Go on.
Is there a persistence pattern? I mean, I'm sure there's tons, but can we describe how we don't lose this data on power outage, but still maintain the benefits of having all this state memory? That's what I think.
So I'm gonna give you the cop-out answer first. Okay. The cop-out answer is the book I recommended to. What's your name?
Alex.
The book I recommended to Alex gets into. I can't bite into this. The book I recommended to Alex, at the end of it, goes into distributed code patterns. It goes into the trade-offs and the constraints that you may have and that you have to consider when you build that code. It talks about React core a little bit and other things like that. The less cop-out answer is, while there isn't really a solution, like, a true solution, right? Like the be-all, end-all solution. You duplicate data and then you just deal with that. So you have caches of the data. So one way to look at this is processes are generally ephemeral. How do you say that?
Ephemeral.
Ephemeral. Thank you. English, difficult. Especially like
Ephemeral.
ephemeral, yeah. You know what I say, yeah. And so you create a process, pass state to it, it does its work, and or it crashes, whatever, right? This problem is entirely limited to whatever subset of your code or your system had this problem. So it's not a big deal because that data is somewhere else, right? And you can limit the size of it, like you get a request from the internets, and you can't trust the internets, right? There are so many things about the internet that are wrong. Just can't trust it, right? So you just put that into a task or something. It does work. It crashes, and you monitor the task. So you go, oh, that crashed. You send the response back. I couldn't do anything with this. I'm sorry. I think that's acceptable. You don't care, right? If your system is well built, it's not gonna crash. If it crashes, it's because something external came into it, and that's the reason for the crash, right? So I wouldn't worry too much about it, and I just wouldn't mix external data with internal data. But you can have, without trying to veer too far, of course, Erlang has something called ETS, Erlang Table Storage, which lets you do basically in-memory storage of things. Imagine it's like Redis, but built into Erlang, basically. It's an approximation.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. You just don't need to add Redis because you have it. It's right there. Erlang is nice. I'm growing to really like Erlang as I go. They just decided that a lot of the programmers that in the world were going to run into the same problems over and over again. So if they just solved those for the programmers, they could worry about the problems that only the programmers could solve. The business domain problems.
Yeah.
I'm liking Erlang more and more as I go, just less work, So It's disk. It's actually disk. It's not distributed. DETS is disk Erlang table storage. So it's for disk-based storage.
So,
It's persistent.
can multiple processes talk to the same
They can.
ETS?
All right. We're way off track. Can we talk about it after? I'm sorry. I don't want to stop this conversation, but I think I should. So we can do this one of two ways. You guys can work on this for a little while, or we can just do this as a thought exercise and you can consider what the architecture might look like, what the processes might be. What do you prefer? Raise your hand if you would rather this be a thought exercise. Raise your hand if you would rather actually do it. All right. I'm sorry, you'll just have to do it later. This is why you have the slides, because those exercises are always valid, right? So as a thought exercise, what does it mean to change rule sets? Like if you have someone who's playing the game, what do you need for them to be able to do while you're doing stuff, behind the scenes?
Spock beats Lizard in one game and Lizard beats Spock in another.
Yeah, well, rock beats, paper beats rock, and Spock beats lizard, or whatever. I think lizard beats Spock.
Well, when you say change the rule sets, are
Yeah.
you saying like change?
So you go from rock, paper, scissors to rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, and the user is still there, still sending messages, still trying to play the game. What do you need? Yeah, so you need, right?
If you have something like a supervisor that proxies all the different rule sets.
Too far forward. So yeah, the first thing is you need some kind of process, which is the process that the user will interact with, right? They're sending messages to the one thing in some fashion. And if you tell them that to change the game, they have to change the module they send a message to or something like that, it doesn't seem like a good user experience, right? Right, so like,
in the rule set that is
right, maybe, yeah? Does that make sense? Like, is this too abstract? Right, I mean, I would think of it as, like, from the user down, right? The user sends a message to maybe something like a game process and says, I want to play rock, right? Or I want to play lizard. And then that game process has to know what the rule set is and then figure out what to do with that move. Maybe it's an invalid move in that rule set. Maybe it isn't. Right? So would there be reasons to have the rule set in that one game process? Are there reasons to store each rule set in their own process? Sorry, a process that handles rules? That's what I'm suggesting, but are you asking a question or?
No.
Okay.
The user would choose which game they want to play, and it shouldn't like change behind, like in between.
Right. Yeah.
You're asking whether or not multiple processes or one with a bunch of different rule sets is getting multiple ones. The processes can be immutable, be totally fixed.
They could, yeah. Right. So this is part of figuring out, we've been at this about 4 hours, right? And we've gone pretty far down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. So the question is now really, what separations make sense? Because you can have a process for a rule set, it just does synchronous calls and returns whatever it wins or loses, right? You could have a process for keeping track of the statistics, right? You could have a process for keeping track of which player is playing what game. What else? I think this is about as atomic as it gets, but I could be wrong. But does it have to be that atomic?
You have like a map of the name of the game,
Mm-hmm.
the rule set, and then the process which encapsulates that logic for that reset?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, that would work too. The interesting thing about this exercise is there isn't a right or wrong answer because it completely those decisions are dependent upon what you need out of the system, right? So there's no obviously wrong idea yet. Yeah, those come out to be business decisions, but as the architects of the system, thinking about those decisions and those trade-offs, see, he gets it. Allows us to prepare for changes or prepare for a more resilient system. Am I losing you? You're just thinking?
Thinking about like with this question brings up another question like anti-patterns. So can you have like coupling between processes that's like you change one in the chain and it kind of like ripples throughout?
Yes, you absolutely can do that. In fact, in my side project right now, I have that, and it's bad. And I did it on purpose too, which is even worse. I was trying to see if I could fix a problem, and I just made it worse. Yeah. So it's possible. Like one of the things I have is the state of one process refers to the PID of another process, and they just send messages to that PID when they need to. And that's currently acceptable, right? But there's nothing saying that you can't connect them that way if they need to be connected that way.
It's just like what are the chances of something, one of them changing and break, and how difficult or
Right.
people will break.
So, this goes into something I am not covering in these slides a little bit, but do you remember spawn versus start link? Right? The first thing we showed you to create a new process was spawn, and then when we got to gen servers, it was suddenly start link.
Yeah.
I completely glossed over that, and it's like, kind of like, nothing to see here, move along. The function that Dave Thomas used in his distributed map was called spawn link. It is not a coincidence that start link and spawn link are the same. There is also a start to go along with spawn, right? Creating a link between the two processes, right? Start link starts a process and links the new process and the parent process, essentially. Well, not parent, but the process that created the other process.
This is where that underline reference.
No, the underscore from is only for those who call that process. I'm saying, oh man. So if you do genserver.startLink, right, the process that is running the code genserver.startLink is going to be linked to the process that just got started. And a link means that if one of them crashes, the other one will crash.
Siblings or
Siblings. It's I even hesitate to say that because when we get to trees, there'll be another meaning for that. But think of them as processes that are connected, and so if one dies, the other one dies.
Branches to each other. Branches. Like if the branch gets cut here, then the rest falls off. No.
I shy away from the tree analogies because we're going to get to supervisors and supervision trees. And so like those words are going to have meaning. They are processes that are connected and such that if one dies, the other one will die. Specifically, if one crashes, the other one will crash.
Are there any other functions to the link? The link portion of the process?
No, so start and start link, spawn and spawn link, they have the exact same behavior. The only difference is one will link both processes and the other one will not. The only difference is, like they will, yeah. Start is used on gen servers, and spawn is used for processes.
So start is just a gen server module.
Yeah.
But spawn is like this within Elixir.
Yeah.
Or
It's a function on the kernel module. So
gen server didn't want to use spawn because it just
you know what? I've been wrong before a lot today. I'm gonna check right now. I'm pretty sure gen server doesn't have spawn, but again, I've been wrong so much. Okay, no, it doesn't. All right. Yes, there's no spawn on gen server.
Okay.
There is a spawn on kernel.
But the start on Git, it's just doing this.
That is one of the things it's doing. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this was intended to be about an hour's worth of work, just so you know, because you were going to think through all of those things and try to implement them and screw up and so forth, right? Which is a very important part of kind of getting your hands dirty with a new language, is screwing up a lot. And then there was a long break, so like we're just like an hour and a half was just passing by, which is good because it means that instead of having to go through this quickly, I can take my time. So, supervisors and applications. Supervisors aren't very big hats. And applications, unfortunately, aren't anything magical. This is about the simplest way I could get to explain it. So, is anything strange, surprising? Still can't bite into this. Sorry, say again? It is not the only purpose. There are other things that it does in that, but they're all related to the idea of being a process watcher. A supervisor will know how many children it has and a bunch of other related things. But this is the core of the thoughts that will lead you down how to begin to use them, such that when you reach a question about how to use them, your thoughts should be in the right direction. I'm going to draw at this point what everyone has ever drawn forever and ever since the beginning of time when they talked about supervisors and supervision trees. And I only have the one color. I only have the one color. All right. So if it's a circle, it's a process. Okay? This is a process. If I'm putting something inside, like a grid, it's a supervisor. Okay? A supervisor, you start children for the supervisor by telling it to start them. And it's just processes that are the children of the supervisor, right? Some of the children can be supervisors. So these will have their own children. Do I need to draw another layer of this, or do you get the idea that this is, again, turtles all the way down?
yes. Turtles. Yes.
Turtles. It's a magic word. It explains everything. The thing that I'm not showing you over here is that generally there's a process above the supervisor. It's called the application, and so we're going to get into that. But this is generally the purpose of the supervisor. If one of your processes crashes for any reason, bad state, bad data, it's going to bring it back up so it's available.
So let me just stop there. So can you do a get between the supervisor and another supervisor? Go for a process and another supervisor or the supervisor?
Oh, that was a lot of words. Hang on. The supervisor, right?
Can you go to a process and then go to another supervisor?
You mean, so like, go up that way? Or this way? So it's possible to do something like it. In this instance, this would likely be a link or something like that. So if this supervisor crashes, this process crashes. But in general, you would want to avoid that because the supervisors are the stable part of your system. So unless you want to have a reason for like all of this to probably die if this dies, which you could do by just having, this be a supervisor and have the processes below anyway. What the supervisors also do, which I haven't yet used a lot, is they define two parameters which are restart frequency, like how often to restart it, and then I think crash frequency, which is if it's restarted this many times in this amount of time, die. And the idea is a safeguard. If it's crashed that much in that many seconds, there's probably something wrong, and taking the system down is probably the best thing to do. And at this point, it turtles all the way up, because there are systems and safeguards within Erlang and Elixir to figure out what to do if the system goes down, so that it can even be restarted if a massive, massive catastrophic crash happens. We're not getting into those. I'm sorry. But just so you know, those things exist. They are there. It is fantastic. I like Erlang. And I'm not even writing Erlang. I forgot what I wrote on this slide. Oh, yes, right. This is my hand wavy. I'm sorry we're not doing this. We could do a supervisor in the REPL, but it's, you're in the REPL and then you're putting supervisor and putting a child on the supervisor, and that's just weird. We could. Actually, it's 4. We have an hour left. How many of you have some sort of working gen server rock, paper, scissors thing going? All right. Half plus. All right. Okay. All right. Well, if the process is up, that's good enough for most of our purposes. Because we're going to get into applications next. This is the buzzword in this talk. I had to put one in. So let's see. Raise your hand if you are familiar with domain-driven design. All right, kind of, sort of, half the people. Domain-driven design is a school of thought that helps you organize your code based on, I guess, in a way that reflects the domain model of your business. That is super high level. An application represents a bounded context in domain-driven design terms. And if you have no idea what that means, essentially it means that all the code that has to do with the same thing should go inside the same application. Right? If you're building a complex system and you have like customer service somewhere and purchases somewhere else, you may have an application called customer service, an application called shopping, and you shouldn't put shopping code in a customer service application. But you might need to call code from the shopping if you need to refund something or whatever. Oh yeah, this is the interactive part of this presentation. Mix is the tool that we use in Elixir for project management. If you want to create a new project, which will be called foo, my imagination knows no bounds, except for that one. This will create a new project, and the module of the project will be called foo. --sup means we're going to make it a supervision tree. This is not necessary, but for our purposes and to get into how supervision trees work, we're going to do this, which I think is the next slide. Yes, that's the next slide. All right. Has this not worked for anyone? Raise your hand if your computer blew up. No computers have blown up. This is a good start. Better than the last presentation.
Do you have a suggestion for an IDE for projects? Do you use anything in particular?
I use Emacs.
Okay.
I have seen, so Atom works pretty well. Alchemist on Atom works well. I think Alchemist on VS Code works well. I cannot bring myself to recommend Sublime. I don't know, actually. I just don't know how Sublime works with it. But I'm pretty sure Elixir has done a pretty good job with the toolkit, and it'll work in just about every editor. So for me, it's Emacs.
Okay. I've been doing VS Code on Windows all day.
Oh, yeah, cool. I would love to say I judge them for using VS Code, but it's actually a really good editor. Like Microsoft has been doing things right in the past 5 years. So they're just playing catch up really, really fast. They're making things open source. They have new languages that don't suck. This is, yeah. Well.
I'm working on a .NET Core.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean .NET. I just.
No, .NET Core is.
Oh, sorry. Oh, actual .NET Core, yes.
And it's good. Has good tooling. It's a lot of improvement.
Yeah, right.
So it's like either you can create a full-blown application with code you don't need, or a bare-bone application that does nothing.
And that's kind of all your choices, yeah. So once you have this, you're going to have a bunch of stuff. Ah, the tree. This doesn't work ever.
Centering the tree.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. If you have tree on your machine, like brew install tree, or maybe sudo apt-get install tree or something, it will look. You'll see this. All I wanted to show is there's not a lot of code, not a lot of files. The good news is the most important file you get to see here. It's application.ex. That's the one we're going into next. There's also a test directory, so you can see what a test looks like. A fair warning is that XUnit is built with macros, so that you do something like assert 1 equals 2, not what you might be used to in other languages. And the error messages are also a lot friendlier, which is very nice. I'm trying to belabor that point so that when the horse is really dead, you can be there to say I killed it. But this is important because it is one of the ways you start thinking about architecting your system, right? As much as I'm a big fan of no big upfront design and emergent design and all those things, you have to not be stupid. I haven't found a kinder way to say this, but this really forces you to start thinking about some of the tooling of Elixir and how you want your system to work, because from the ground up, the second you start writing an application in Elixir, you have to consider resiliency. And this is how you start. So we're going to open this file, and I'm going to show a tiny, tiny snippet of it, because this is where magic will happen, and I'm going to connect magic to remove it. So this is a function called start, and this is a convention for OTP again. Applications have this function. This function gets called when you start an application. Okay? We are going to do what the code says to do, and we're going to ignore type and args. I can get into that later if you want. Import the supervisor spec just means we want to have access to the worker function, which will return a spec for a child process. This is probably really abstract. Supervisors work with other processes, but they have to know the definition of that process, which is the module to work with, the initial arguments, and whatever options you may want to pass to that process. In our example here, we define children to be a list with a single worker, foo.worker, which is a made-up module name, just in case that wasn't obvious. This list is a list of the arguments that somebody got a victory, I think. This is a list of the arguments that you're going to pass into the function, into the module, when you start it. And these are options that you can pass into the process so that it sort of knows so that the supervisor knows what to do with it. Restart permanent means the supervisor is always going to bring this process up again. It's like, oh, you're dead. Necromancy. Sorry.
Great word. You know, it's true.
That's true. Yeah, right. It's just I do what I have to. So now there's a bit of magic, very fundamentally, that I need to resolve for you, because I said we're going to start food.worker, and we're going to pass these arguments into it, right? And as far as we know right now, that is just voodoo. Another word I don't use very often. Fear not, it is not voodoo. The convention to have is to define a function called startLink. This is, in fact, the function that is called by the supervisor on the module. I'm going to go up to the previous slide in a second. But you define a function called startLink that has arguments. And then this will call genserver.startLink with the module, with arguments, and with a name, food.worker. It was the question you asked like 4 hours ago. There it is, it's answered. And here is the value of having a name, right? You start it, and we pass no arguments to it, right? Pass nil. And then we say, genserver, where is this process? That is the same PID. Magic. And you know what that means, right? It means you don't have to store the PID everywhere anymore. And that's kind of nice, because PIDs change.
This is baked into genserver.
Yep, this is baked into Erlang. This is OTP, baby. I can't believe I just said that.
Very, very American.
I'm working on it. So, if we go back for a second, right? What startLink is going to do with every child that's in there, right? Whatever comes out of the worker function, is going to call the function startLink on this module with these arguments. Okay? This is something that you can do yourself. Well, we have a little bit of time that I didn't plan on having, which is good. Kernel has a function called apply, which takes 3 arguments. The module name, the function name, and the arguments. Which, by the way, this is probably important. You might read documentation or articles or chats, and people will talk about MFA, module function arguments. That's what that is. The people who made multiple factor authentication are bad people, and I hate them. It makes reading things very confusing. But yes, references to MFA as module function arguments. And whereas if you come from Ruby, this is a bad thing, here this is just how that works. Because all you're doing is calling a function on a module, so why not? I'm going to have to check that I didn't ask you to do something crazy. I've lost all faith in myself. Oh no, this is reasonable. Yeah, cool. For some definition of reasonable. So again, I mean, it's 4. We have 55 minutes. If you're done typing, we can now just go on to the talking part of it. This is why I said take breaks. Nobody took breaks. But if you're up to it, you can start doing that. What is the temperature of the room? Who wants to type? Who wants to think? 68? All right, thanks. You're okay with typing? Yeah, but you're crazy. Like, we knew that. Anybody else? Bueller.
I just got my genserver working.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
It doesn't do the things that you wanted it to do.
Oh, no. Doing the things I wanted is just like optional.
It implements asynchronous playing of rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, very nice. Okay. Not necessarily super useful to the players,
Right.
but very nice. Which actually is a wonderful example of the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. So I'm going to go with no one wants to write any code anymore, which doesn't surprise me, honestly. It's been a very long day. Good luck. Good thing, there's a small break after it. Oh yeah, deploying. Man, I really screwed up the last 2 hours of this. There's no good exercises, no small things. All these connected dots is exhausting. Still can't bite into this. So I'm actually going to take you through the steps of doing the hot deployment. You don't have to do it now because all the steps are here. But this is the next step. So there is a new package called Distillery. People are really going nuts with the whole Elixir alchemy thing. Mix projects, distillery to, yeah. While it is 1.0, the README still says it's not exactly production ready, which is interesting. It does some things I don't fully understand around the hot code reloading, because I kind of know how that's supposed to work in Erlang, and I have no idea how to do it myself. So I need to go ask the guy some questions. By the way, if you're interested in Elixir, the Elixir Lang Slack channel is very active and very friendly. I will put a link to it in the chat room.
Also, Twitter is real friendly.
Twitter is friendly?
When it comes to Elixir.
Oh yeah, okay, all right, when it comes to Elixir. You scared me for a second. I'm like, this is not Earth, is it? What year is this? So this is, by the way, just how you add a dependency to your project, because most of the time you will not want to reinvent the wheel. Well, actually, I say that. I assume that. Forgive me for assuming. I happen to not want to reinvent the wheel. That's why I'm using Elixir. So you add this project. You add this dependency. Mixdeps.get is how you get them. Mixrelease.init is a tool, is a task you get from Distillery, and it will set you up with the config directory and a file called rel.exs, like release.exs, in the config directory. And you can just build the release right from there. So you tell it to use a production environment. I'm going to tell you, I went to the Slack channel when I first tried this, and I had issues with it, and they told me that I needed both production things. I suspect that's probably something Distillery will fix as we go, but I don't know. And then the all-powerful tarball. And this is seriously the release process for Erlang and Elixir, is you get a tarball, you move it to the server, you untar it. Actually, you don't have to untar it for what we're going to do. But then you tell the Erlang to upgrade and use that code as the new code. And that's kind of it. It's, it is logic from before all this Docker madness. So they did what they had to, and it worked. So this tarball, you're going to deploy wherever you want for our purposes. This step replaces the scp it or rsync it to a server, right? If you don't know what this command does, because I just assume people know tar, right? X is extract, Z is a gzip file, F is this file, -C is over here. I'm not going to pretend I know tar really, really well, but I know that command really, really well. Starting the app is done that way. It provides you with a bin directory and a script that has the name of the project. If you just run that, it will give you a command line output, and you'll get a bunch of things you can do, including connect to the REPL, shut it down, start it, upgrade it, and so forth.
Does this include the OTP runtime?
That depends on what you put in the release.exs file. It is an option, yeah. If I had committed my release.exs file to the repository, I could show it to you, but I didn't. I'm sorry. But yeah, it is an option, and it's actually important if you want to deploy to, if you want to compile on a different environment architecture than you want your production server to be on, then you need a copy of the code, the OTP code for the production environment so that you can bundle it properly when you compile.
So you can cross-compile to the target.
Essentially, yeah, right. This is stuff that is, it's all covered. By the way, what we're doing is we're doing that, just the very, very condensed version, because he explains a lot of things. Like, if you're using Elixir, really, if you might be using Elixir, I can't tell, you'll want to be reading this because this will give you a lot more information. But this is the super happy path, right? Might be called the methadone path, I'm not sure. So you copy it, you untar it, you start the app, and then you connect to it. This is the bit that's important because connecting to it gives you a REPL. And what we're going to do right now is build another release, upgrade it, and show that you haven't lost connection to your app. Because it's been a long day, you're going to have to trust me that this works. But I tried it once. So there's no guarantee that it actually works all the time, but it worked for me. Take that as you will. And this gives you access to the REPL for the node that the project is running on. This works in production. If you have a machine and you have a system that is like WhatsApp and you need to debug it, you can connect to a REPL on the running system that way. This is kind of nice. I had to break this into 2 slides because that was even more unreadable. We open a new terminal because, of course, we're connecting to a REPL in the first one, so we need another one. You change the version number in rel.exs. No, mix.exs, that's right. This is mix.exs. This is actually correct. It's not an error. I've made many of them today, but not this one. You change the version number in mix.exs, which is where you tell Elixir which version of the app is being compiled. Then you run mixenv prod, mix release, -- upgrade, and then the environment. This is the key that tells it to build something for a hot deploy. That's it. That's like all. If distillery does what it's supposed to do, this is all you have to do. And if that's really, really true, I am incredibly impressed. Like, I need to go ask the guy what he did, and/or read the source code. But again, it worked for me. So hey. This will create a file locally under build, prod, release, project name, whatever that is. Releases, the new version number, and the gzip file, the tarball. Then you're going to create a directory where you deploy, so like /deploy /whatever, right? Releases /new version number. This is the weirdest line because it's really hard to talk about it. So I'm going to stop here. Who has no idea what this line means? You're right. You actually can't tell what I'm pointing at. The very first one. Yeah. It doesn't work. I'm not tall enough. Create directory path releases new version number. Yes, it's create a directory in the production deploy path. Right?
So you're going to patch with special binary patch? I mean, yeah, this is where you're going to store your upgrade binary.
Yeah, so you're putting the tarball in that directory, right? Which is the second step. And then you're going to call path bin project name upgrade, new version number. So you'll go from 0.1.0 to 0.1.1. Which bit?
Like you create
Oh, the path?
the path.
It is a convention. It is the one distillery requires.
Okay.
Like, you don't have a choice in that matter. I believe this is actually the convention for Erlang. And again, this would be one of those things you don't have a choice.
Okay, so upgrade, look at the new version number and finds the
Yeah.
file and says, okay.
If you're doing this, it's actually going to first tell you, I could not find that version number, I'm going to see if there's a tarball.
Okay.
Then it goes to find the tarball, untars it, does a bunch of magic, and then you can go back to the previous terminal and see that the REPL is still running. And then you break open the bubbly.
Because you're running the old binary, telling it to upgrade itself with the new version.
Yeah, so when the code is running, it's version A, and when you're done with that, with the code that's running is version B.
But yeah, it also upgraded the whole deployment.
Yes, right.
Meaning it upgraded itself all everywhere.
Yes, it's completely upgraded. What you're running in the REPL is the new code.
This is the hot swapping.
Yeah. This is the hot code swap.
And does that update code within running processes? Or do you have some long
No,
process?
it does not. This is something Erlang does not do.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. There are conventions about the endpoints, the bounds around which, like which processes get upgraded. Essentially what they do is they get killed and then reloaded with the new code. But if you happen to fully qualify your function call, like instead of doing like a my module dot duplicate all the numbers in this function in this list, right? If you called that instead of just duplicate all the numbers, that would be a sign to upgrade the code now and then run the code. It is possible to really configure, like if you're going through the Erlang like low-level system, to really configure which modules get updated how and when, which is really cool and kind of mind-bending. I haven't had to do that yet.
You just crash all the processes you want to upgrade in order to the update. So everything will be spammed.
So I guess you can if you have a supervisor that's watching them, but why would you want to crash them? They're doing work. They're doing good work. Let them finish.
You want to upgrade them because that's bug or something.
Well,
After this, you possibly overload something or
you can. Like again, you can with the Erlang specification, you can say this needs to die, and then load the new code, right? And then at the upgrade time, it will say, all right, all these processes are dying. And just stop them. So whatever they're doing is lost. But yeah, if you want to, why not?
Does this also include all the stuff where if you change like data structures, you can write those, I think you write a function or something that tells how to map from the old.
Yes, there is a version upgrade callback or something like that. I forget the name, which lets you define the current state for the processes and how to go from the old state to the new state, so that they can keep doing their work without having to die. Because if there's no code changes, no sense in taking them down.
And that's all included in this process.
As far as I know. Again, Distillery does a lot of things that I still consider magic. I think it's amazing, but I haven't used this in production yet. Your mileage may vary. Phase of the moon might or might not change things. Good time for questions, like we haven't done that before. This is a really cool article. We have like 40 minutes left, and that's a good time for any and all questions, and or like accepting your mind is melting and walking away now. There's no shame. I think at 5:30 there's something happening, maybe like where we had the keynote, or I'm not sure. Oh yeah, right. Let me see if they say something to the LambdaConf speakers. Nope, talking about the dinner.
Where's the slide